Sam Smith is an extraordinary entrepreneur. She was the CEO of FinCap, taking it from 1 million in annual revenue to 1 million in weekly revenue, eventually having the business listed on the London Stock Exchange. She was a pioneer for female entrepreneurs and has recently launched Superscalers, which is a community for high growth businesses, taking women to over 50 million in turnover and supporting each other on the wonderful journey along the way. Welcome, Sam Smith. We're absolutely delighted to have you today on Tag Lab.
Very nice to be here. Thanks, Laura.
So I heard you speak at a conference for female founders in Edinburgh, and it was a remarkable story. I knew that we just had to get you on to talk about all things scaling and growing a business and having that big ambition. So those are the topics that we will cover today. And I thought it would be nice to kick us off by hearing a little bit about your leadership journey at FinCap and the journey from going from 1 million in annual revenue to that becoming your weekly turnover. If you could kick us off with that journey.
Well, it was quite a bit of a journey, actually, because I started as sort of an almost entrepreneur. So I'd left KPMG at 23, didn't want to do the big banking stuff, and went to join JM, which was a relatively unknown broker that wanted to set up a different division. So I got there and it was a desk, an office, a phone, that was it. And it was go and set up a corporate finance business. So for 10 years, that first scaling piece was very much, call it, it's almost that 1 to 3 million revenue stage where you're just iterating, you're just working out what the hell's going on and your head down. And I had no idea during that time that I was even an entrepreneur. I was just building something, reinvesting our profits, getting bigger. More clients were coming in, we're raising more money, and it was just great fun. But I loved doing it, and I just wanted to keep getting better. It was only really 10 years after that we were at about 3.8 million revenue, and we'd sustained that for a period of time. When we did the buyout, that we really thought, right, let's ramp it up. And I think this point where you decide that you want to really go for it is different for everybody. But for me, that's one, because I was a bit young, didn't know what I was doing, making up as I go along. It was that point where you think, we've got something here. And I don't think before that we quite knew what that was. So we were in a very competitive market. And our USP was very much, we are going to treat these SMEs as really important clients. We really care about them. Whereas our investment banking market was very much treating the SMEs, the much smaller companies, who would get the junior team and they would get less resource. And, to me, there was a disconnect. It's like, these are the entrepreneurs of the future. These are the businesses that are going to turn into the Googles. So why are we not really looking after them? I don't get it. So that was our sub USP, and we did the buyout and grew from there. And that second 10 years got us from 3 million to 52 million turnover. So it's a big scaling difference. And I think what I learned was you've got to constantly think big, big picture vision, which is miles away that you can see, plus a 3 to 5 year window of where you want to go next. But also you will find that USP, not necessarily at the beginning, but on the way. And that's okay. And for me, that our culture became our real USP, which we probably discovered only around 4 or 5 years after our buyout. So quite late in the journey. And that's what we used to super scale and make our first acquisition. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a feel of the journey.
It does. And I think, there's no shortcuts when you're scaling. I think it is just that kind of consistent day by day and year by year. And then you start to look back and you think, wow, we've actually traveled a pretty far distance. And I've heard you speak about kind of reframing what your overall financial goals were. So say you're at 15 million, you say, oh, it'd be great if we got to 18 or we get to 20, and you're kind of having that quite solid continued growth. But then I think you changed your mindset and you said, you know what, we're going to go for 50 or we're going to get to 100. And financially, nothing was changing in the budgets, but mentally you shifted, and I think it kind of unlocked something for you. Can you just speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, when you're in it, you're right. What I was doing was, every 2 to 3 years, right, what's our plan for the next 2 to 3 years? I want to go from here to here. Every time I did that 2 to 3 year plan, I'd have where I was starting and where I wanted to get to. And where I wanted to get to was always quite ambitious. But I also had this vision in my mind of, right, where is the real end point? And what was important as we kept moving up our 2 to 3 year plans and going from 0 to 1, 1 to 2, 2 to 3, this big picture of where I wanted to get to, this big figure, needed to also shift, because that was about not just executing the next 3 years and delivering that plan. It's about seeing what's going to get you there. And when you have a very big picture number in your head, which you don't need to tell anybody, but you need to have it there so you can visualize it. What I found, it starts opening this growth window. So if you just think about, right, I'm at 5 million now and I want to get to 10, if that's all you're focused on, you will build to 10. What I'm saying is you've got to say, right, we're going to build to 10 in 3 years, but we've got to think a couple of doubling journeys ahead. So actually, we've got to visualize ourselves as a 50 or 100 million pound business and start to put the processes and things you need to achieve that in place now, so that when you get to the 10, you move straight through. So that was something I sort of learned, whether it was just by doing it myself, but also advising so many businesses, that you start seeing patterns, is that if you don't plan for that, way beyond 3 year stage, you probably won't get there, but you certainly won't move past it very quickly. And all the successful businesses seem to follow this same trend: is growth is not linear. You don't go from 1 million to 2 million revenue to 3 to then 3.5. You double. So every doubling journey requires the same effort. So actually, if you've done the hard work of getting to 1 million revenue, think how many doubling journeys you've been on. A lot. And every doubling journey is as hard as the last. So you're like broken by 1 million. You've iterated, you've done everything by yourself. You've got so many doubling journeys. So this is hard. What I'm then saying is, look, you've done that. But if you do just 5 more doubling journeys, you'll go from 1 to 2 to 2 to 4, 4 to 8, 8 to 16, and then you'll be a 32 million pound business. And that's, potentially 5 to 10 year doubling process. But you need to think like that. Otherwise, you won't put the processes in place and you won't see the opportunities that are there to help you achieve that scale. So I think that's something that I felt everyone knew, but actually was a concept that I don't think people do know, because you're just not in an ecosystem where people are talking about it. You're just head down doing your thing and finding it all really hard.
Yeah. And I think the flip side of that as well is, if you don't do that, then all of a sudden you're at 5 million or 8 million and you don't have the processes to get you to that next level. And I think that's where businesses get quite stuck, because they think, oh, this is amazing, we hit our target. And then you think, oh, actually, we've outgrown a lot of things, in terms of the process or the technology or the systems that you've got. So probably it's some of it is even subconscious. If you have that mindset and you have that vision, then all of the way and all of the processes you are building for that bigger picture that you think you'll ultimately get to, which, none of it's smooth, none of it's like a nice, easy journey, but that makes sense.
Yeah, it's important for people to realize that people do get stuck, and there are points in a journey where you're moving along the revenue curve where you will get stuck. And the reason you get stuck is because you need to go back to the basics of, what do I need to do? And when I started realizing, actually, there are 4 things where you get stuck that you need to make sure you move through. And it's always a brand problem, a sales problem, it's a process problem, or it's a team problem. So if you think about, you're stuck at 10 million and you want to get to 20, and you can see this, 100 million pound business. When you're at 10, what does the team look like? What is the sales channel look like? What's the sales process? What are all your processes? What's your brand like? Is your brand a brand that's going to get you through to 20 and then to 100? Or is it a brand that's going to be a bit tired and people won't be seeing it in that way once you're at 20? Does it need a refresh? So all these things need looking at the point in time where you're about to make the jump, because you need to get there and go past there. So you can't just get there and say, right, I need a team now, got to put all new process in, got to do a rebrand. You've got to be thinking that ahead, so you're constantly ready to do the next move.
Do you see with the businesses that you work with that it's uncommon to have that bigger end game that everybody is thinking, maybe in smaller, more incremental steps? And I suppose that's what you're trying to support businesses and to get to.
I think it's different depending on who you talk to. And what I'm finding, which is part of the idea of setting up the Superscalers, is if you're an underrepresented fan, and by that I mean the system doesn't work for you, you don't understand the system, it's not built for you, you're not in networks, you're not in communities where they talk about it, it's really difficult to understand what's happening and what's going on elsewhere. So we really want to make a difference to making that journey very easy and getting people to know what they don't know. which is hard
Yeah.
when it's a lonely game and you're sitting there on your own and you don't know this. Everyone else has been this same challenge, but just talking about it and sharing those stories helps. But the underrepresented founders do seem to have different issues in
Hmm.
accessing information and thinking about how they scale and ambition than some others. And it came up with our first in-person event from the Superscalers last week. We had lots of funders there, but we had a lady who was previously based in the US. He said, well, US go out, there's some founders and they're massively ambitious. They don't think they're going to fail. They ask for a lot of money. Their ambition is big. In terms of VCs here, you have some people who will go out and they will broadly be men who will have a really big picture, massive ambition, want to raise a lot of money, might fail, they get funded. And then you have a lot of underrepresented founders who are building very slowly, sustainable, brilliant
Yeah.
businesses that don't have that level of ambition and probably don't want it. I never wanted it. They can't go out with that big enough ambition, so they can't get funded. You do, well, I see that different founders have different levels of ambition that they're comfortable with, and some will absolutely go for a very big number and be happy, but those where the system doesn't quite work and they feel less comfortable prefer to build slower.
And do you think even layered on top of those complexities, you've got, I don't know if this is true or not, you'll maybe have a view, that female founders who are looking for maybe VC funding, they are held to a higher standard maybe than a male counterpart because you're fewer and it's almost like the elite of the elite that are going for this kind of level of funding. Do you think that is accurate or do you think it's just a smaller
I'm
number?
not. I'm not sure. I mean, you hear stories. I think the main issue is, like I said, women generally, and what we've seen from the superscaling communities, grow in a different way, build a business in a different way. They iterate. They still grow fast, but they're not saying, right, I'm going to start up and I'm going to be £1 billion company by next week. That isn't that way we do things. And actually, there's a real similarity between how we build businesses and how family offices build businesses, families. And they build businesses in a very different way to everybody else. And when I think about this, you think, why are we doing it? It's always more about you want to change something, you want to build a legacy, you want to build security for your family. There are reasons you're doing it which are beyond I just want to make a really profitable business massive. And that aligns with the family business mentality. So I think there's a lot of nuance in there about why are we doing it? And one of the core reasons isn't just to make a load of money. And when that's the case, you want to build slightly slower. So I think the VC system, yes, it might have lots of biases in it, but I see there's a disconnect with if you want to grow slightly slower, it's taken you a bit longer and you just want to, yes, you want to super scale, but you don't want to suddenly go from here to here because you find that it's too big a jump, it's too risky. VC capital isn't the right capital for you. Plus, you've got the issue of most VCs are in tech and a lot of women don't build tech businesses. So I think from our Superscaler stats, 14% of those businesses over 10 million revenue are tech businesses. So professional services,
That's interesting.
consumer-based businesses, leisure, they're not sectors that are massively funded. So if there's no understanding that they don't quite fit in a box. So there are lots of issues around why women don't get funded. And I think a lot of them are structural rather than just the bias that you talk about.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And maybe as well, you are growing more sustainably. You've got arguably a profitable business as
Yes,
well. So
largely are.
it's, and I do see that a lot. Like we just never thought about not being profitable. It was just like that seems really basic,
Because you're growing by reinvesting your profits, and that's what
Exactly.
I did. And when I look at my journey, the first 10 years, as I said at the beginning, to 3 million in 10 years, 3 million to 50 million in the next 10 years. But there is no way, if yes, I was young, yes, I didn't know what I was doing, I was learning on the job, but if someone had said, do you want 3 million and you could really go for it, I wasn't ready. I had to do
Yeah.
it in my own way, in my own time. So I actually liked the way I was learning on the job. I learned everything about the client, everything about what that customer needed. I learned the industry. I learned where our USP might be. I learned how to manage people. I learned what was our point of difference, what motivated people, why culture was key. So those, and everyone's an individual. At the end of the day, entrepreneurship is a very, it's an individual game, isn't it? You're doing your own thing in your own way. You do it at your own pace. So it's not suited to everyone to just go for it, but doesn't mean you shouldn't be funded just because of that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's getting that funding at the right time as well, because sometimes we see businesses that get it too early. You maybe invest in this very, shiny exec team, and you're not, as you say, doing the do and kind of learning step by step, making the mistakes. And I think, it's knowing when is the right time for you and your business, and is that funding going to take you to the next level? And can you clearly articulate what that vision is at that stage? And I think that is a really delicate balance to get. But yeah, I think we've kind of had a similar journey, 15 years just growing, and it's like that. You're doubling, but you go from 100K to 200K, and then eventually it's 1 million, and then it's 2 million, and then we've kind of grown. Which it seems slow, but then you look back and you think, oh, that's
And
a
you
good
don't
journey.
look back, do you? It's only that
No.
I've had the chance to look back now I've left and I'm doing something else, and I'm seeing lots of different businesses. I judge for Entrepreneur of the Year, and you see so many businesses that you realize they're all doing the same thing. You don't look back, but when you do, I'm lucky enough to see all this information. You think this has scaled very quickly, but there's not a point in the entrepreneur's journey where they think, right, I just realized I've done this, now I'm going to go there. You just get more confident, more momentum. It just becomes easier. Going from 25 million to 50 million, I say, is the same as going from 1 to 2 in terms of effort. But it doesn't seem like that at the time. You feel like you can never get there. When you're there, it's the same old thing. You work out where you're going, you look at how you do it, you put a plan together, and you execute it. And it's no different. So I think taking the scary part out of superscaling is a really important part for me, particularly around this underrepresented group, where you need people to talk in a way that they get it, they relate to you. Say, well, I didn't know really how I was going to get from 25 to 50. Again, we sat down, how we're going to do it. Probably need to acquire something. Okay, let's do that. What we're going to acquire, learn about it, integrate it. Right, I have to learn that business now. That's how it works. You just, as long as you keep going in the growth mindset, you will solve those problems when you get there. But I just don't want people to think they can't do it, and they believe in themselves more, that they can just keep going.
Yeah. Oh, I think that's very true. And if you looked back to yourself 10 years ago and say, oh, could you imagine that you're doing this thing and that thing, and those are the challenges, you think, oh no, I don't know if I could do that. But I suppose it's just fast forwarding that a little bit and say, okay, like, let's double that and take that to 20 million. But it's I think it's the longevity and being able to actually keep going and navigating each one of those jumps that does fill you with confidence to get to the next level.
It's interesting. Now I've done the Superscalers. Now I've launched the Superscalers, which was in September, a new business. This happens to me every day. I think I know what I'm doing. I want to make an impact, but also I'm building a business. So I have to remember I'm also setting up a startup again in a completely different sector. And I have to build a community and, provide value and sell services. And, you're having to start from scratch. And there are days when I think, I can't do this. And then I think, what are you talking about? Of course you can do it. Come on. And I have these, there's someone in your head going, I can't. Yes, I can. Yes, I can't. So it doesn't go away, this feeling of I'm going to struggle. The thing about entrepreneurship is, if you've got a community, you believe in yourself, you've got people who can help you believe in you, you just pass through those moments and you get through. But without that community, you can see why people give up at any particular day of the week. It's a hard game, isn't it? It's an extreme sport.
Yeah, and it's so uncomfortable so much of the time, and as you say, like starting a new business, when you think, oh, you've got all the credentials, all the business, like you've done it all on paper, but again, you're doing something new, it's out your comfort zone, but you just keep going and you keep kind of building on that. Whereas the easy thing would be, oh, like, I don't want to do that, but you just push through that discomfort, which never goes away. If you're growing, there's always something new. There's always a different challenge. There's always something coming up. So yeah, entrepreneurship is an extreme sport. I like that. I heard the other day, resilience is easier the second time around. I think it was at that conference, and I thought that is very accurate too.
Yeah, although I think there's pressure. I think this time around, I
Maybe,
didn't know what I was doing the first time. I didn't know I was building something. Now I know I'm building something and I really want it to work.
Yeah.
It's like, but yeah, the doubts, they don't
Still
go
hard.
away.
So I wanted to go to the data that you had shared, which I just found absolutely fascinating because I
Yeah.
think you don't really understand what's going around you. And it was only when I heard you, I think the stat was there was 53 women in Scotland with businesses doing over 10 million in revenue, which I was very proud that we were one of them. But I had just never thought about that kind of level. And I think it was 700 in the UK total compared to about 3,000 male-owned businesses doing that kind of level of revenue. And it seems like we have kind of female-owned businesses that are equal to a stage. And then once we get up to those higher levels of revenue, it's disproportionately male. So have you got any insights as to why that is, or where your kind of mission is focused now on getting more women to that 10 million plus 50 million kind
Yeah.
of level?
So we started measuring at the Scale Up Institute is the Scale Up founders, and they're growing at 20% a year for 3 years. So good, fast growth companies, female founders that have grown fast and got to 10 million. We only started measuring in 2019. But when we did, there were less than 200. So we're less than 200 in the whole UK who'd built a fast growth business to 10 million revenue and beyond. So that's a tiny number. 5 years later, we're at 740. So the increase is absolutely exponential. It's still small, but it's exponential. And then I look at those 740 women and think, how long did it take you to get there? And if you break down those numbers, it's an average of probably 15 years, but 70% of those women took at least 10 years, 10 to 20 plus years to build to 10 million. And so a lot of this is about ecosystem building. So if it takes you an average 15 years to get to 10 million in the way we grow, because we're iterating, we're doing it in our own way. There's also lots of other stuff going on in our life that might mean you stop, start, don't feel ready to go for it, whatever. And you probably haven't got a lot of funding, you're probably bootstrapping. So that growth can be quite slow. So the ecosystem is changing. More women are setting up businesses all the time. Those businesses are scaling to 1 million. Those 1 million businesses are then scaling to 5, and the 5 are getting to 10. So if I now look back at the stats, so 740, we've got to 10 million. But if you go back again, there are around 7,000 that have got to 5 million, and there are around 16,000 that have got to 1 million. So we will come through, in 5 years' time, hopefully those numbers are doubling automatically, if not much more. Because all those 5 million businesses, what would it take for us to get all those 5 million, the 7,000 to 10 million?
Yeah.
Probably not a lot, if we can work on communities and helping them realize you can achieve that and keep going and want to keep going and get funding if you need it. So part of it is ecosystem and just having the time to build them. Part of it is also what's going on around you. The stats are, well, hopefully they start to change, but to get past 1 million, you're 5 times more likely to get past 1 million revenue if you're a man than a woman.
Oh, really?
And that can be, no one quite knows why, because you can't, there's so detailed explanations. It could be funding, but I think a lot of it is you start the business to gain an income, to build a lifestyle business, to get you out of a situation or in a better financial position. Whatever the reason you're doing it for, is usually not, I want to grow something massive. So you get to 1 million, you've done something hard, probably absolutely knackered doing it on your own. Jump it to the next stage is quite a big deal. If you don't know anyone that's doing it, if you don't know that you're in the same space as everybody else, if you don't have that coaching style of community, you don't know where to go. So people just stop. They think that's fine, I'll just stay at 1 million and I've got enough income, I've done what I set out to do. They don't realise that the next bit is probably the easiest bit relatively. It's the most rewarding bit. And actually, in terms of making impact, that's where you can really make a difference. Plus, you can do it in a way where maybe you don't need to be daily in there as CEO. It's probably the 10 million level where you can properly start stepping out and bringing in senior team members to do all those jobs that you've been doing for years and years and years. So there is always a point where your CEO job can become different, become a chair type role. You can get a professional manager in to do it, a co-founder. That's what people don't realize. It's you're not always on your own, and scaling almost gets you out of your business in a much healthier way than just staying at 1 million and just having that almost, thing on your shoulder that you can never get out of it, and you probably can't sell it at that level of turnover either.
Exactly.
So yeah, we really want to encourage more getting over 10, and I really hope, Laura, those numbers can double as quickly as possible. And the Superscalers is sponsoring that data now. So every September, I think we're going back up to Edinburgh this year on the 16th of September for the big female growth conference, but we'll be issuing those numbers as to how many are now getting past 10 million. So it will be very interesting to watch and see how we progress from here.
And that's very encouraging, I think, to hear that the numbers are going from that 200 to 700. Like, that is monumental growth when you think about that pretty short time frame. And actually it is, there's, like we said earlier, there's no shortcut to doing that. It does just take that time, and so the data does have to be looked at over a pretty long period. Do you think that first million is actually the hardest to even get to that stage? Like, or do you think once you get over that, then it actually does get easier, like you've learned everything the really hard way? Or do you think there's an inflection point that is the most challenging for businesses to get to?
So from my personal experience, it was by far the hardest. I think most entrepreneurs I talk to at that stage, because you forget later, it is the hardest. And it's because you've gone on all these doubling journeys. So 1, you don't know what you're doing. 2, you're going on many doubling journeys. 3, no one's heard of you. So you've got to get your brand out there. But you're iterating all the time. You're pivoting and moving around, and you probably have no money and no people. So only if you are very lucky to get really good seed funding to do something probably quite big, and then you spend a lot of money. I'm not sure that's a brilliant way to scale anyway, but it's a big failure rate of doing that. But you're putting it on a shoestring, aren't you? You're cobbling it together. And I think all the best businesses learn like that. So that sort of almost lifestyle, iterating, stage 1 of growing your business can be anything up to 10 plus years. It could be 1 year, and you think, right, we know what we're doing. We've got a plan. We've got this global, but that's unusual. Most businesses take time. So it is really, really hard. And it's also hard because it's the loneliest bit you'll ever be, because you don't have that network yet. You don't even have time to start building that network. There are great accelerators now. So there are, the networks are improving. Probably when I set one up in the beginning, it was just just make it up. It was hardly anyone to talk. I think no one to talk to was setting up a business. Now it's better, but it's definitely the hardest bit.
You're reminding me of those early days, and I'm thinking it probably took us about 6 years to get to 1 million in turnover, and you've got no staff, no money, trying to keep hold of your customers, and then eventually you kind of get there. So but you do forget.
And then you
You've
might
quite a short
step
memory.
back. If you lose a customer, Laura, what would you go back to the journey that you do forget, because as soon as you move on, you've forgotten about the last bit. But you do go out and say, right, I lost that customer. Well, we go backwards. There are points in that first 10 years of my journey where we went backwards quite a few times, and then you might have to cut back, or it panics you because you think, oh God, I don't want to invest, because what if that happens again? You've got to build your confidence again. So I think it does happen to everybody. How everybody talks about that first stage is quite different. And if you think about, the ecosystem, that isn't a normal thing for people to share. I think in our community, we're really quite good and vulnerable about that and talk about it. But in some communities, you won't talk about the early days and how difficult it was. And it'll just be like, no, I've built this and it's great. And that bit was easy. Well, that's complete and utter rubbish. It's not true. And that doesn't help other people to try and think they can do it.
Yeah, and it is so much, you're surviving, really. You're just trying to cling on to get past that point, and then actually move to the next stage. So what advice would you give to someone who's in that kind of 0 to 1 million? Like, how do they keep going to get past that point? Like, what would be your advice to somebody who's in that space thinking, I don't know if I can even get to 1 million?
So I think the most important thing is the utter belief in your vision. So I think if you've got the vision right and your why is right and you know why you're doing it, then you just have to stick with that. And whenever there's that down moment where you think you can't do it, you need the network and a community around you that are going to support you. So my best people were, a coach, a mentor, someone who'd done it before, speaking to someone at the next stage, just at the next stage, to just give you confidence that you can do it. But pivoting, you might have to pivot many times at that point. You are in the iterating phase. So just because something doesn't work, if you believe in the mission, you can probably adapt and pivot and change from what you learn. So I think constant learning, just utterly be focused on the vision, be prepared to change it if it's going wrong, move fast, and really speak to people at the next stage and build that support network around you where you have those moments, you've got someone to talk to.
Did you have early mentors and coaches, like when you were kind of in that growth journey? You were quite young when you were kind of building the business. How did you find those people who helped you along the way?
So from 0 to 3, I was within a bigger company. So I was building a division within a bigger company. So my boss that hired me, John Finn, was amazing. So he didn't know how to grow a corporate finance business, but he knew what I was doing. He was helping. So, I was going it, but I had a team around me that I could talk to, not necessarily about building, but again, in my mindset, it was just build this revenue, let's just get this P&L looking good. Let's just win some clients. Let's just do a great job. So I didn't think I'm building a business here. I just thought we win some clients and we do a really good job and we win some more clients. And sometimes that is all it is at the beginning. It's focus on clients, win more clients, see more clients, try more things, generate more leads, get out there, talk to people, and just remain relentlessly focused on your client. And sometimes now what I do see is early stage entrepreneurs, they've forgotten that bit about this is only going to work if the client gets it to work. So spending a lot on your brand and, messaging and lead gen. It's like, if you can't get one client to pay for this and then get another client to pay for this, you're not going anywhere. So that's all I did at the beginning. I probably only started getting mentors and coaches from about seven odd million, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I had no idea I was building something before that, if I'm totally honest. It was just happening, and we were head down and we never looked up and we're just doing our thing.
Yeah. I think that relentless focus on the customer or the product as well. I think you can have all the sales and the marketing, but if there's something wrong with the product, it's always going to kind of slide back down the hill. So I think that's good advice, and maybe thinking, have the ambition, but not thinking too far ahead, like just actually get the things stable, which I think is really good advice. So maybe you could talk a little bit about the underrepresented founders and what can we do more as a community of scaling businesses to make sure that it feels an inclusive place and we're seeing everything from all the different angles? Like maybe you've got some examples or stories you could share from the groups that you're really trying to support.
Yeah, so I think one of the big things is focusing on culture. So I think, we are in a world where things went very, very box ticky, and we seem to be reversing from that, which is, it's a shame that that's taking away from the point of it all. But to me, it's also quite good to go back to focusing on culture drives diverse thinking. It helps diverse founders. It's a really positive thing. So inclusive culture is where I think it all starts. So all businesses can focus on that, and that drives inclusion on its own. Other things I think are around really what we can do to bring on the next generation, which almost comes into schools, like where's your talent coming from? How do we find the right talent and work on, for example, social mobility, which is a big issue, which we've started to touch the surface on, but it doesn't really get a mention. We've covered certain groups and done certain things, but we don't think broadly about, well, what about all the kids in schools that don't ever have any work experience? So the stat is 40% of kids in state school have no career guidance whatsoever and no access to work experience. So that's a massive, massive number, and there's no money in the system to fund that. So if you think about what businesses could do, actually going into finding a way into schools, which is what a company we're part of, your game plan, we're invested in, do a great job of providing content from businesses and turning into something that kids can understand to get them interested in that sector. Now that actually moves the dial, because you start to see people will look at things and say, maybe I will go in that direction. Maybe I have thought about engineering, maybe, but you've got to make it relatable, and the system isn't going to solve this problem. So business could absolutely solve this problem by, spending a little bit of money. It's not even much money, but turning what they do into something interesting for kids, and that will create inclusion. That will find those people that have the talent but have absolutely no opportunity of getting there unless we intervene. So, that is in the workplace, in entrepreneurship, it's the same thing. We've just got to focus on access, focus on entrepreneurship in schools, very early, in my opinion, so people can see that's actually a route. I could go and do that. If I'm not good at exams, maybe I could be an entrepreneur. There are great skill sets which actually, particularly with neurodiversity is made for being an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
But at school, if you've got neurodiversity and aren't particularly academic, you're going to struggle at school, and you might start thinking that you are not worth anything and you're not going to be anything. Was actually saying, well, your skill set is perfectly suited to something entrepreneurial, and that value piece suddenly means someone's connected with the system. You might have all these entrepreneurs that would never have thought about it, that are creating successful lives, but also creating growth for the economy as well.
Yeah, and jobs and everything that goes alongside it. Do you see any great examples of schools you think that is doing that so well in terms of like building entrepreneurship as a viable path for their students? Is there anyone that's doing that really well, or other countries that you kind of see that working? You think that's what we need to be doing more of here?
So some schools are good at taking on what's available. So when we started a long time ago, now probably 10 years ago, putting in entrepreneurship courses into primary schools, you'd find there would be a head teacher who was very, very open-minded. So it all comes down to the growth mindset of the person running the school. So if you've got good leaders and who have got a great growth mindset, they will bring in these things and do a very good job. But it's very sporadic. So there are some resources that work. From the Tenor Challenge to Julian Hall's got a great business ultra education. Schools can pay for outside entrepreneurs to come in and teach it. There's Your Game Plan that are providing content into schools. Any school can sign up for that. Only a certain number have. There's loads of resources, but you need the head teacher. And in other countries, America probably the standout because of the way they teach confidence. It's not necessarily business, but they are ahead because that confidence, ambition piece, and you can be whatever you want to be, and less focus on the academics. That's nurturing an entrepreneurial mindset. Do they teach it in school? There's nowhere that they're saying that's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, and it needs that person to drive it, and it is different types of skills that I think can build that kind of overall entrepreneurial ambition, which I do see in the US. There is a real focus on public speaking, which I think builds confidence, which in turn then builds kind of confidence in your own abilities. So, you're always up in front of the class doing show and tell. And I think we do less of that. I can see it changing, but I think over time, that plus having access to this level of knowledge and training, and then having teachers that support it is how we build this next generation of entrepreneurs and make the UK a more appealing place maybe to do business. And it creates a bigger community as well, which I think is exactly what you're trying to do. And probably for myself as well, I think that's where I've had the most value as an entrepreneur, is like the communities that we've got access to and other people that are doing it. So I think the more of that builds, a much stronger ecosystem, which I hope is the case.
Yeah, and mindset is absolutely key. If someone believes in you and you believe you can do it, it's not, that's about entrepreneurship, that's about life, that's about jobs, that's about your overall happiness. There is a massive part to play in entrepreneurship and life about your mindset. And we don't seem to focus on the mindset of believing in yourself, and that just as a simple way to solve problems. Because then you get in a problem-solving mode. You don't get in a moaning about everything mode.
Yeah.
And that's how problems get solved. So if you're sitting someone that's like me in financial services, I didn't like the culture in financial services. Like, I'm the only woman. It's awful. Why treating people like this? Why cutting the bottom 10%, not really caring? They just don't care about junior staff. That's how it was when I started. I thought, I don't think this is right. So then I could change the culture in my business. If I'd been in a big bank, no chance. Now I would have been sitting there being the one moaning Minnie, saying, why aren't we doing this? And no one listening to me. Because I was allowed to set up my own firm, that opportunity gave me the chance to go, I'm not having that culture. I'm doing something different. And that's what you find with the underrepresented founder. If you can put that mindset early on that you see a problem, well, you go and solve the problem. Because if there is a problem, there's probably money that you can make in solving that problem. So let's see the problem and let's go and sort it out. And that's a really positive way, great for society, great for idea generation, great for disruption. That's sort of almost what we need. Let's let everybody go and fix all their problems. Then there's no problem.
Yeah. And I think it's
job done.
It is, yeah, perfect. It's so liberating on a personal level, I think, to be like, okay, there's a problem. What are you going to do about it? And it's, you take that full accountability. So you live and die by that decision. So if it goes well, it's on you. If it doesn't go well, it's also on you. And I think it stops that kind of negative thinking because you're looking at the bigger picture, and how you get there might change, but then that's within your control, which I think is hugely exciting and probably quite motivating as an entrepreneur. But yeah, you have difficult moments, but it's all your fault anyway. So I think that is actually like quite liberating as a prospect. So lastly, I just want to hear what your overall ambition is for Superscalers, and where would you like to be 5 years from now?
Okay, so the mission is to have more underrepresented founders superscaling from everywhere. And the Superscalers is 50 million mark. And that's all about influence, being in the room. So our plan for 2030 is to double the number of female superscalers in the UK. That's our one specific goal. So we've got around 80 at the moment that have achieved that 50 million status. So yes, 750 have got to 10, but only 80 have got to 50. So if we could double that in 5 years, that I would be very happy about that. But I think it's also trying to move the ecosystem along in cohorts, creating a community that's the most trusted platform. It's global. I want to build the largest community in the world for underrepresented founders, over 1 million revenue. Just all the connections mean we can accelerate that time to superscale. We can, the time can be collapsed, and we can help you grow by being part of that community where you learn all the lessons. So very cohort based, you're in a cohort with someone who's at your revenue stage, to going through the issues real time with them, but also meeting people at 1, 2, 3 stages above, which also keep that ambition piece going to give you, the confidence that actually they're just like me. They were where I was. They didn't know anything at 1 million. They've now built something great. They probably had many different difficulties along the way. So doubling that number, encouraging more underrepresented founders, going global, and starting to really have a brand out there for representing all those founders that feel the systems never work for them. They've been on their own, demystifying that, finding a community that is their tribe, that's their place, that no question is too simple. You can be very vulnerable and you can just learn in a really fast, practical way. And it's only founders. So that's all you're around, just founders who've done it. No one else.
It's a unique proposition, and we are absolutely here for it and supporting you all the way in and be part of the journey. So hopefully we can be one of those 50 million plus.
You will be, not hopefully.
We will be. Yeah, we will be. Yeah, we will be.
We'll be sending you a lovely certificate.
Oh, that would be great fun. That would be nice. We'd never get a certificate for these kind of things.
Well, we're putting that in the process.
I love that. That's a great idea.
There'll be milestones, and actually have a celebration, because
we
should celebrate people who've got to this revenue number. It's a big deal.
Oh, it is. Yeah, we had a party when the first time we did £1 million in a month. We had a big party just like on the day, and it was great. But we probably don't celebrate enough, so we should. And then my last question for you is more of just your own kind of personal opinion. If there was one thing that you could put on a billboard that that everybody in the world would see it, what would be your thing that you would like to put on a billboard in terms of a message or a quote or a life lesson that you live by?
Okay, well, I've got loads of these because I'm the queen of the life lesson. I love them, but I think my number one would just be you. Just be you and be authentic. And that that for me is my biggest challenge is, in a male dominated world, finding my own voice, finding my authenticity has been very hard, and being you is enough. I think that, there's something about that. And then there must be a mindset piece, mustn't there? That,
Yeah.
make a difference, make a change, do something that's going to feel good here. That's really important to me.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you, Sam. You've been absolutely amazing. Thank you for the time. Wish you all the best, and we are delighted to be part of the journey with you. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Tag Lab. I really hope you enjoyed it. Please make sure that you subscribe by hitting follow on whatever podcast platform you listen to so you can get the latest episodes. Thanks.